Thanks for tuning in to the 3D Tutor.
Hey guys, and welcome to this next episode of the tree tutorial. So I've changed the reference image in this part. It's exactly the same process as the first two parts of what I've done, but I've just changed the reference image. So I'm going to be working with this one. You can obviously continue with your own reference image. So what I'm going to be doing is, first of all, I'm going to make a copy of this tree trunk. Okay, so you need to make sure you keep an original of it because you don't want to be messing around with that, because we're going to need it a little bit later on for the branches and other things like that. So right now we're going to start with the base of the tree, which is quite thick. So what I'm going to do is move that across to start with, and I might just just scale it to make it a little bit thicker. Okay, so the height is okay. Let's just try and make it a little bit taller as well, just by scaling with the middle of the scale tool, like so. So I'm going to leave it like that for now, and then obviously I can tweak it a little bit later anyway. So now I'm just going to move that aside just for a moment. We're going to go into the create tab, and we're going to create a line. So we're going to go over to the shapes panel just there, click onto line, and we're going to create a line which is going to allow this model to follow that line, and it's going to shape it based on this line. So we need to be sure that we create the line correctly. So we want to the way that you're going to use the line is we're going to go with the click, 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 click method. Very similar to the polygon lasso tool within Photoshop. So we're going to go from here. I'm going to go fairly straight, but around about here, and again, try and keep it fairly smooth. Don't make too harsh angles there with the line. So try and keep it very smooth, or as smooth as you can anyway. So I'm going to go with the one just here. It looks like there's a bit of a tree, like the actual tree trunk goes over up here, like so. So I'm going to go maybe a little bit taller. Let's go to around about here. We're just going to have to guess now because you can't really see it. That's the problem. So we're going to go to about here. You want to make sure that this line is, I guess, taller than the actual tree trunk itself. So I'm going to go to about here, so it's a little bit taller, and that's going to be okay. I can see there that that line's a little bit jagged, so I'm just going to go into my modify tab, click on the line, and then go to vertex. I'm just going to be moving that vertex across a little bit just to soften that angle once again. Alright, so it's a lot better. So once you've got that done, we're going to go back into the perspective view. We're going to click onto this tree trunk just like that, so the model. We're going to go in our modify list, and we're going to go to Path Deform WSM. Okay, so Path Deform WSM is better than using the normal Path Deform. It didn't seem to work too well when I tried it. You can obviously try them. It might work fine for you if you try the original Path Deform, but I want to use the one with the WSM. It just seems to follow the shape of the line a lot better. So we go with Path Deform, and I'm going to go to Pick Path, and I'm going to click on the line that I've just created. Okay, so by default it's going to be on the wrong axis, so I'm going to press the Y just here, and that's going to follow that pretty nicely. And then I'm going to go to the percent, and I'm going to drag that percent up until it's, I guess it's kind of in the right kind of position. So you don't want it too high, you don't want it too low, so it's just kind of in the right position like so. Obviously it's still not lining up perfectly, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mess around with some of these settings. So what I tend to do here, if I just maximize the front view by pressing Alt and W, I can then mess around with some of these things. So stretch is obviously going to stretch it taller or shorter, so we're not going to mess with that too much. You can use rotation, so that's going to pull it across a little bit as well. So you see what that does? It's kind of almost rolling it, so that's going to get roughly where we want that to go, to around about there. And then we're going to use twist as well, so you can see how that kind of twists, and you can mess around with the twist of that, which is pretty interesting. You know, you can do really odd things and really weird things with this. So I'm going to twist it just a touch, just so it kind of matches up with that line once again. Okay, so once that's done, you know, you can obviously mess around with the Path Deform itself. So as you move that, it's going to change the base position of the tree trunk, but that's going to work pretty nicely. So I'm going to right click on the Path Deform binding in the modifier list. I'm going to then right click it and go on to collapse to, and then hit yes, and that's going to collapse it down into our edit poly. So within edit poly, we're going to go to vertex, and we're going to try and line this up a little bit better, because at the base it's not really where I want that to be. So what I need to do is establish where that needs to go. So I'm going to first of all make these three a lot bigger. So I'm going to go to my scale tool, and I'm going to scale with this border just here. So don't scale with the middle of the scale tool, because that's going to make it taller as well. So we just want it to be wider. So we're just going to click and drag over that to make it wider, and then maybe a little bit on this row as well. just to kind of make it transition between the width of the base that I've just set and also the width of the main tree trunk. So that's working a lot better. And now I can go into vertex. You can see like it's actually not too lined up very well at all. So I'm just going to try and match that up a little bit better, especially around this kind of area. It kind of comes across to the left hand side. So I'm just going to push that across like so. And this one here can go across as well. So it's a little bit small, the base, so I'm just going to make that a little bit bigger with the scale tool. So again, just using that border like that, and that's going to be a lot better. So I can do the same on this one just a little bit, just to kind of soften that angle once again. And that's pretty much it, to be fair. Like, we've got that nicely shaped, and that is that initial first tree trunk done. So we can have a closer look. We can make sure, obviously there should be no seam on that because we set it up that way. And yeah, it's looking pretty damn good if I say so myself. So we're going to go in and we're just going to now start creating the branches that sort of stem off that main tree trunk. Okay, so it's going to be a very similar process. I'm just going to create the lines of where I need to place those branches. So this is going to be a very similar thing. So I'm going to go ahead and create these lines. So we're going to start from inside the tree trunk. Don't start from the edge just here, and don't do that. We want it to make sure that it goes from inside, because it's going to help that tree or that branch to kind of look embedded into the main tree trunk. So we're going to click from here. We're just going to go up, and again, just follow the shape. At some point, like now, we're not really going to be able to see, but I'm just going to guess it and try and sort of feel where that might actually go. So something around about there might be okay. So that's okay. And then I can do this one here, which is quite a major branch again. So I'm going to go around about here. It looks like it kind of flows through here. I'm going to go here actually, because then what I could do a little bit later is I could then stem another one off to go up in that direction. So that's okay. This one as well, if you want to work on something. It's a little bit thicker, it's a little bit of an odd one because I don't really see where that goes, but I can definitely see that branch. So I'm going to leave that the way it is. And once again, we have this one here. So just going to quickly draw this out. Okay, so once that's done, we're going to again make a copy of this original branch. So we need one. Actually, we need, let's see how many we need. We need 1, 2, 3, because I made 3 lines, possibly 4 as well, actually, because I made the line a little bit further up. So press OK. So those are all the copies. So if I select the first one, I'm going to go to path deform, right, and then I'm going to go to pick path. I'm going to select the one on the left hand side. So you see what that's done. Once again, we're going to go and change it to the y-axis. We're going to go into that front view, and we're going to go to stretch. So we're going to stretch that a little bit smaller. Well, we can tweak it and we can see how that's going to look. We'll go on to percent, and we're going to push that up. A little bit too big, so I'm going to stretch that and make it a little bit smaller again. And then we can play around with the rotation like so. So just kind of make that match. So you see what that's done? It's just sort of pulled it down. You can twist it a little bit if you wanted to, but twisting seems to be messing it up a little bit. So I'm going to leave it like that. Leave the twist on 0. So that's kind of quite nice. I'm just going to leave that the way that is. I'm going to go with the next line. I'm going to do, sorry, the next branch. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to go to path deform, pick path, and then click on that one. Make sure you change the path deform axis to Y. We're going to maybe stretch that a little bit smaller because, again, just try and match it up a little bit better. So that's going to go, you want this branch to look like it's going from inside this main tree trunk, so don't worry about it overlapping. That's not really a big deal at all. Maybe just bring it in a little bit. So we'll look at the rotation as well, try and match that up a little bit, and also the twist, so you can kind of get that where it should go. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish off the last two. It's exactly the same process as what we've just done, and then I'm going to come back and we will edit it and obviously see how it's looking. Now, one last thing before I do that is, if you think that your tree trunk is a little bit wide or a little bit too big or fat for the reference, then what you can do is just sort of scale that smaller or thinner, just using that same border as before. Okay, so you can use the reference image to figure out how wide that needs to be. So you can see just there, that's a fairly sort of, I'm looking at this one here, it's fairly thin, isn't it? It's very thin, in fact. So what I need to do, actually, is just scale this quite a little bit thinner. So that's going to be a lot better. Like, the last thing you want is every single branch to be the same width, because that's not the way that branches look. So that's going to be a lot better. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Just path deform, WSM. Pick path, I'm going to pick the line, make sure I go to the y-axis, So I'm going to go ahead and finish this off, and then I'll show you what it looks like at the very end. Okay, so that's all of the branches created. What I can actually do now is I can move the branches where they need to go. But before that's going to work, again, we need to just click on each branch. We need to right click on the path deform, and we're going to go to collapse 2. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for all the branches really quickly. Now if the pivot points are in the wrong location, like so, of course we don't want them all the way down there. We actually want the pivot to be on the base of each branch, because that's going to make our life a lot easier when it comes to placing it. But you know, if you want, you can just go into hierarchy, go to effect pivot only. Then you can first of all center it to the object, like so, and that's going to bring it into the middle. In fact, if it makes life a little bit easier, once again, if you go into that front view, we're just going to change the pivot so it's where the actual middle of the tree trunk is. So you see where that middle edge runs down, and where it meets the actual tree, just like that. And that's going to mean that that's the pivot, so when we rotate the object as well, and when we rotate this branch, it's going to rotate from this point and not from the middle of the actual trunk. So if I just pull that across so it overlaps, if I wanted to reposition it, then obviously it's going to rotate from that point just there. Obviously it's not going to work if you start spinning it around like that, because you can see the gap. But what you would have to do is, if you wanted to rotate it, you could rotate it first and then simply move it over. So you can see there's a bit of a gap there now. So then we can just drag it in just a touch and move it over so it overlaps again. Okay, so that's going to be fairly good. So I'm going to leave it around about there. In fact, let's just change the angle just to make it look a little bit interesting. So I'm just going to go ahead and overlap that like so. That's pretty good. I'm going to do the same on this one here as well. So I'm going to effect pivot only, center to the object, and just in this front view just here, if I just move that pivot to where it kind of meets the tree, so around about here in the middle again, so you can see where that tree edge that from the main tree trunk is going to be. I'm just going to deselect effect pivot only, and then I'm going to be placing this where it needs to go and overlap. Okay, so with this one I might choose to rotate it around this way and maybe do something like this. Okay, so again it's slightly different. And again, this is the same thing. I'm going to do the same thing with the other two branches, guys, just to kind of make them look a little bit diverse. One thing I can't tell from this reference is whether each branch is push forward or push backwards. So I'm going to try and guess it and just make it look as interesting as I can, because again, it's just a reference. We can obviously make tweaks and things like that anyway. Okay, so I've pretty much done that now, as you can see. And I'm going to show you what that looks like, and some of the things that you can do to tweak it to make it look better. So I'm going to get rid of all these lines now, because I'm pretty much done with them. I've used them now to shape the tree trunk. So I've kind of, if I just get rid of this or move it out of the way for just a second, you can see what's starting to happen there. We've got the main tree trunk and the other ones, the branches that come out, which is okay. Looks pretty good. Maybe they're a little bit too thick, but they are pretty thick in the model anyway, sorry, in the reference anyway. One thing that you'll notice is like around about this area where we've got this branch, it doesn't quite look like it's flowing out as well as it should be. So I'm gonna just click and drag over some of these vertices. I'm just gonna pull them down, maybe just pull them across a little bit just to kind of make it match just that little bit more. It's gonna help us. Okay, so that's a little bit better. Okay, so possibly this should be a little bit thinner. So what I could do, we can try and use the push modifier. So if you go down in the modifier list, go to push. Push effectively can push the model bigger, so make it fatter. We can make it thinner as well, so you can tweak that. You just need to be careful on the end where we have this point that it doesn't kind of have any glitching or anything like that, but it seems to be working pretty well. So it's going to make it thinner, just to kind of match that reference once again. Okay, so that's a little bit better. I say better, but look what I've done to the end there. I've absolutely just completely squished it. So again, be careful not to go too thin, because then it will cross over on itself. So you want it to, you want to ensure that it's not getting too thin. If you find that it's thin there, and what you could then do is you can collapse that down, select only the areas that you want to use the push modifier on, and then you can add the push modifier like so, and that would only affect that area just there. So you can even make that a little bit thinner as well. Okay, so obviously tweak it and, you know, experiment, because that's all part of the fun. And then we're going to collapse 2, and then yeah, so that's pretty much it, guys. You just want to keep tweaking it until you're happy with the way it's looking, and then hopefully at that point you'll be able to, you know, move on and create all the main branches and then move on, and actually we'll go on to creating the foliage. So if you want to get this step done, guys, in the next video, which should be released pretty soon, we're going to cover how to actually create the foliage, the alpha mapped or the opacity mapped foliage, and applying it onto this tree base mesh. Hopefully you found this video interesting and you found it useful in developing your own trees, and yeah, I'll catch you all next time.